What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Magic the Conversation. Today's episode, we will be reviewing the Fallen Empires set. This is, next couple of sets aren't going to be as far as the card power, I think, fell a little bit in the set. Fallen Empires came out in November 1994. The card symbol is this crown here representing the empires. Storyline wise, we are still seeing the after effects of the Brothers' War and when Urza had detonated the Golgothian Silex, causing a blanket of ash to cover the world. We saw some of that in the dark in the previous set. Fallen Empires, where this is a more focused on creature tribes, so to speak, because a lot of the creatures in this deck for each color will be represented of one or two tribes. And as we get to those creatures, I'll explain further in that aspect. So starting off, we have I can't pronounce this. Aeolipile. Artifact costs 2. You pay 1 and tap it. And sacrifice it to have it to deal 2 damage to any target. Although fragile, the Aeolipile could be quite destructive. From Sarpadian Empire's Value 1. Assume it's like an explosive flask. It's okay. It gives any color the ability to do 2 damage directly to any target, which is decent. And it gets around a lot of protection. So if a creature has protection from red and you're using a red deck, you can run these piles to still do damage to the creature. And you can even finish off your opponent if they're at 2 life or less, which is pretty cool. A lot of colors don't get access to those kind of spells. But it is an artifact, so your opponent can destroy it if you are not able to use its ability in time. Moving on, Armor Thrall. 3 mana, 1/3. You tap it and sacrifice it to put a +1/+2 counter on target creature. The worst thing about being a mercenary for the Ebon Hand is having to wear a dead Thrall from Ivra Jur's Daughter. So Thrall is one of the 2 black tribal creature types that is represented in Fallen Empires. Thralls were kind of laboratory-born creatures that were used for slavery, for food. This one is being depicted mainly for its armor. We can see here that a member of the Ebon Hand, which is like a cult aligned with black mana, they are ready to skin this armor thrall so they can use its armor for, I guess, combat or to bolster their own defenses. You can see the fear in this poor thrall's face. Eventually, the thralls would rebel against their slavers. That story would also be told as the cards themselves will further be revealed. A lot of cards got alternate artwork because we have the same card, just different work here. Armor Thrall as well by my favorite artist, Ron Spencer. This one looks a lot more menacing, but where it lacks the armor that this one previously does. We can see the huge chunks of chitin on its back, where this one has more like porcupine quills or spinal quills. And the third one, this one is very primitive looking. I don't know if he's throwing up in the sewer or if he's trying to drink water from the sewer. Looks a bit crocodilian, but he does have armor on him. Oh, I gotta read. They have more flavor text. They gave their lives to strengthen the Order's armies until they declined this honor in favor of joining the Thrall Rebellion. From Jorana Rur, the counterinsurgency commander. So this already talks about how the Thrall rebelled They stopped wanting to be harvested and sacrificed. Except for a bare spot at the base of their skulls, armor thralls bear interlocking plates and spikes with the strength of steel. Their design is almost artistic. From Endrick Sar. This section about thralls. And we have yet another one. This one just looks like a human that had armor already grafted to him. Probably the worst of all four of the artworks. Occasionally an ally balked at wearing a dead thrall as armor. The priest's whips, however, were usually enough to encourage a more practical outlook. This could be depicting just one of the members already wearing the carapace of the dead thrall. Balm of Restoration. 2 mana. You pay 1, tap it, sacrifice it to gain 2 life or to prevent up to 2 damage to any player or creature. It's almost like the opposite of a Leopile. Not all armies enjoyed the services of a medic. For them, Balm of Restoration was that much more valuable. Here we have another Thrall, the Basil Thrall. Costs 2 mana, 1/2. You tap it and sacrifice it to add 2 black mana to your mana pool. So, I guess if you need an extra mana, or if you need 2 extra mana, these would come in handy. You're not really losing out on anything because you're paying 2 to cast them, but you can't sacrifice them right away because they have to tap in order to be sacrificed. Initially bred for sacrifice, the thralls eventually turned on their masters, the Order of the Ebon Hand, with gruesome results. This guy just looks freaky. He has limbs going all over the place, and his spine is inverted. This one looks more cartoony. They look like they're going to be used as sacrifices. Although my later designs were much more sophisticated, Basil Thralls were no less of a success. Hey Chimpapa, how are you doing? Hope you're having a good weekend, and I hope your Smash stream went well. I don't even know what I'm looking at, but a lot of Richard Kane Ferguson's artwork is like that. I assume this is the Thrall here. He looks like he might be on an altar already because we see some light shining on him, and he looks like he's melting. And here we have what looks like an overseer, just overseeing, for lack of a better word, the whole sacrifice. To create the first thralls, I only introduced alchemic elements into the Order's necromancy. Turok's principles remained unchanged. From Endrick Sar, the Master Breeder. So Endrick Sar, I assume this could be him, is one of the Master Breeders of the Thralls. I don't know if he survived their rebellion, though. There's another artwork. This one looks more menacing. Above all, a well-crafted thrall should be hideous, blasted of countenance and twisted of limb to inspire fear and revulsion. Well, some of them definitely do express both. This one has like alien xenomorph features to it. But I think this artwork here is actually, as weird as it looks, probably represented the best because these thralls, they're not going to be good in combat. Your main use for them is to boost your mana by 2 if you need to cast a higher spell. And if you don't have the land to pay, you can sacrifice the thralls to get there. Bottomless Vault. I don't think I've ever seen this card. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tapped. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step. If you do, it gets a storage counter. And then you can tap it and remove any number of storage counters from it to add 1 black to your mana pool for each counter you remove. So it takes a long time to activate. Definitely an outdated card. Back in the day, it was probably okay at best. But with all... there's just strictly better land out there. And by the time you get the mana's worth of the counters on it, you end up being behind anyway because you have to keep the land tapped to get the counter. Brassclaw Orcs. 3 mana, 3/2. That's okay. You're still getting the 3 attack for the 3 mana. Cannot be assigned to block any creatures with power greater than 1. That's their drawback. Orcs would be represented in red. I think this set actually represents orcs out of any other Magic set in Magic history, past, present, and future. The Brass Claws delighted in lightning raids on Akishan and Dwarven towns. An unprepared enemy is easier to defeat. And they have more artwork as well. Brass Claws were typical orcs. Quick to laud their own prowess in battle, quick to jeer at their opponents, and quicker still to run away when things started to look slightly dangerous. They're like a cross between humans and goblins. I do remember owning this version. A whole skin is worth 1,000 victories. Orcish veteran of the Battle of Montford. He's looking to look like Wolverine, I guess, with these claws. Oh, I had this version too. He's even got longer claws. The large brass claws worn by some Sarpadian orc tribes were among the least feared weapons ever known. I guess they didn't actually do so well in their battles. Breeding Pit. 4-mana enchantment. During your upkeep, pay 2 black or sacrifice the pit. At the end of your turn, put a Thrall token onto the battlefield. Treat that token as a 0/1 black creature. The Thralls bred at a terrifying pace. In the end, they overwhelmed the Order of the Ebon Hand. I guess this is where the dark magic forms these wicked-looking creatures. If you a lot of black cards, especially from what we've already reviewed, you would have to sacrifice a creature during your upkeep. Breeding Pit, as long as you're able to pay the 2 black mana during your upkeep, pretty much gives you a creature to sacrifice each turn. For cards like Lord of the Pit, I think Breeding Pit was probably made especially for him. Minions of Leshrac. There are all kinds of cards for black where you had to sacrifice a creature to pay certain costs. It also gives you a blocker every turn if you need the defense, because the tokens stay out as long as they live. They didn't have anything offensively since they had 0 attack, but there will be Thrall cards that boost the power of other Thralls in this set, especially. Combat Medic. 3 mana, 0/2. You pay a white and a colorless to prevent 1 damage to any player or creature. Although Akisha's combat medics borrowed much of their knowledge from other societies, their skills were their own. His feet almost look like another set of hands. This was actually pretty good. You didn't have to tap them to use the ability. If you had a lot of access to white mana, you could easily prevent damage dealt to you, especially if they had like a 1/1 creature that was unblockable. If you had the mana to pay, you would just negate the damage each time. More artwork of them. We'd no sooner knock them back on their heels than those of their cursed sawbones would show up and patch them back together again. From Erva Daughter. I think Fallen Empires might have been the only set that had 4 different artworks for more than a couple of cards, because we've seen all the different artworks for the Urza lands and the Mishra lands. In the next set, after this, I believe it's Homelands. They might have done that. I don't remember correctly, but it was not really well received. I've never seen this artwork. I assume they're writing a Thrall. I don't know what creature this is. And he actually looks like he's got modern, it's a inverted version of the cross, of the red cross. Without combat medics, Akisha could probably not have withstood the forces of chaos as long as it did. And it's probably the best artwork because it actually shows a medic healing a soldier. Time enough to become a medic once you're hurt too badly to fight. For now, Akeisha needs your strength more than your compassion. Lydia Winworth, Mayor of Trocaire. Conch Horn. 2 mana. Pay 1, tap it, and sacrifice it. Draw 2 cards then put any 1 card from your hand on top of your library. Even the most skilled of modern mages only partially understand the Conch Horn's awesome power. It's not really that powerful. I see there's a theme here in Fallen Empires. 2 mana artifacts, and you pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice them to do. Giving any color card draw is good. But for 3 mana total, you draw 2, and then you put 1 back on top. There are a lot better card draw spells for blue. It is early card draw for as far as artifact wise. So I have to say it is decent at best though. Deep Spawn. 8 mana, 6/6 blue creature with trample. During your upkeep, take the top 2 cards from your deck and put them in your graveyard or sacrifice Deep Spawn. You can pay a blue. Deep Spawn may not be the target of spells or abilities until the end of your turn, or until the end of the turn, and does not untap during your next untap step. If Deep Spawn is untapped, tap it. Deep Spawn, this is a giant lobster. Homerids are the like lobster people of Sarpedia. We won't really see many more Homerids in any other set. I know they will get reprinted in like 1 or 2 more sets way in the future as a callback to sets of previous. And we'll get to those eventually later on down the road. But the idea of a giant lobster was pretty cool in my head. I had Deep Spawn. I never actually got to use it. Its cost, where you take the top 2 cards of your deck and put it in your graveyard, is okay. If you have a deck that wants your graveyard to get larger, like if you have graveyard revival cards, or you want to activate certain abilities in your graveyard, Deep Spawn will help you get there. The fact that it costs 8 mana for a 6/6 trample it's outdated nowadays, but blue didn't really have that. Most of the time, the blue's big creatures had the drawback of if your opponent didn't have an island, they couldn't even attack. And then its second ability, where it cannot be the target of spells or effect abilities until end of turn. If your opponent tries to use a removal spell on it for just 1 blue, you stop it from dying to that spell. But at a drawback, you can't use it on your next turn. It's probably good in casual Magic back in its day, but like I said, very outdated. But it's currently my favorite card in the Fallen Empire set. Delif's Cone. It doesn't cost anything to cast. You can tap it and sacrifice it. If target creature you control attacks and is not blocked, you may choose to gain life equal to its power. If you do, it deals no damage to the opponent this turn. Where is it written that beasts must cause pain? Delif Ponderings. I don't, unless you really need the life, this card is not good at all. You always want to damage your opponent whenever possible. And unless you're going to lose the game without gaining life, I mean, there's just strictly better life gain cards, even for artifacts. Here's Delif's Cube. I'm not even sure who Delif is. Pay 1 to cast. Pay 2, tap it. If target creature you control attacks and is not blocked, it deals no damage to its opponent. Instead, put a cube counter on Delif's Cube. Then you can pay 2 to remove a cube counter from it to regenerate target creature. Again, the fact that you have to cancel one of your own successful attacks is not worth the reward of regenerating a creature. Derailleur. 4 mana, 4/4. Back in the day, that's really good. That's a really aggressive card, especially for black 4 mana 4/4. However, it does come with a drawback. Your black spells cost an additional black to cast, so it makes your rest of your spells slower earlier on if you cast this card early. But 4 mana 4/4, your opponent's gonna have to usually use 2 creatures to trade with it, or trade with their creature with 4 toughness, as long as they don't have a wall. Strength it has, but at the cost of a continuous supply of energy. Such failure can bear only one result, from the execution order of Endrik Sar, the Master Breeder. It does look like a hodgepodge of different animals and creatures. I think this is like it's got the body of a horse, some tentacle tails, elongated jaw, kind of like an eel, crocodilian, maybe a primate or gorilla body of some sort. But it was a powerhouse for the Thralls. Draconian Silix. For 3 mana, you pay 2, tap it, discard a card at random from your hand to regenerate a creature. There is no gain without sacrifice, Accretion Proverb. The artwork looks great, but the card itself, not worth it. Again, you're throwing away too much to just regenerate one of your creatures. Unless you have a handful of land that you can sacrifice. Dwarven Armorer. For 1 red, he's a 0/2. You pay red and tap him. Discard a card from your hand to either put a toughness +1 counter or a power +1 counter on target creature. I did not know this card existed. The few remaining pieces from this period suggest the dwarves eventually made weapons and armor out of everything, including children's toys. Dwarves were on the other end of red's representation for tribal creatures. So far for white, we've had humans. For black, we've had thralls. For red, we've had dwarves and orcs. And for blue, so far we've had the Homerid. We haven't seen any green creatures yet, but we will be reviewing them shortly. Dwarven Catapult. For 1 red and X. It's an instant. Deals X damage divided evenly among all of your opponent's creatures, rounded down. Often greatly outnumbered in battle, dwarves relied on catapults as one means of damaging a large army. If you had a lot of mana, then this card could board wipe your opponent, depending on how strong their creatures were. The fact that you have to divide it evenly and that it's rounded down kind of takes away the power of the card. But I did use it. I did use it. I think it was in one of my first red decks that I had. And I had mid success with it. But it does bring back memories. Hey, Vinny, welcome in. Fallen Empires, Magic's Toilet Paper. Whenever I talk about Fallen Empires, I'm always going to, I think, say Deep Spawn and Hymn to Turok are the only 2 cards that I remember by heart from the set. Dwarven Hold. Dwarven Hold is the red version of that black bottomless mine or vault or cave, whatever that card was. It's a red version where you keep it tapped and then you get a storage counter on it. Definitely outdated, but the artwork on this card also looks great. Dwarven Lieutenant. For 2 red, 1/2, you can pay red in a colorless. Target dwarf gets +1 power until end of turn. Dwarven officers were tireless in battle, moving up and down the lines to rally their troops and boost morale. Dwarves will often be at war with the orcs. Again, for territory. Dwarven Runes comes into play. Tap. You can tap it for red as normal, or you can tap it and sacrifice it to add 2 red to your mana pool, giving red a little bit of a mana boost. They did have a land like this for each color. Dwarven Soldier. 2 mana, 2/1. If Dwarven Soldier blocks or is blocked by an orc, it gets +2 toughness until end of turn. Let no one say we did not fight until the last. Headstone fragment from a mass grave found in the Crimson Peaks. This just further emphasizes what I said about the dwarves often warring with the orcs. Resources are dwindling because there will be an upcoming ice age. And that is the name of one of Magic's future sets that will be coming up very soon. As when winter approaches, it's definitely going to be cold for all the denizens. Dwarven Soldier got alternate art. I would have liked to seen him fight an orc based on his ability, but he looks like he's fighting a young dragon or some sort of lizard or dinosaur. There's a legend among present-day dwarves that dwarves of Sarpedia will one day return to defend dwarven kind against a deadly peril. These guys look like Vikings. Although the dwarves staunchly defended their walled city-states against the orcs, their civilization was the first to fall, and its name was sadly lost. Ebon Praetor, 6 mana, 5/5 avatar. I don't know. I think this is like a cow skull. Trample, first strike. During your upkeep, put a -2/-2 on Ebon Praetor. You may sacrifice a creature during your upkeep to remove a -- counter from Ebon Praetor. If the creature sacrificed was a thrall, also put a +1 power counter on Ebon Praetor. Only one creature may be sacrificed in this manner each turn. So this combined with Breeding Pit was a good combo. I think these two cards were made for each other. The artwork is very cartoony, though. I don't know why they have a giant rabbit forcing this thrall to be sacrificed to the Praetor. Like, I don't know if this was a joke by the artist, Randy. Like, why a rabbit? Why a giant rabbit of anything? Like, it would even make more sense if the rabbit was the sacrifice. But this card just screams cartoony. I never seen it played. 6 mana, 5/5, trample and first strike is good. But if you don't have the creatures to sacrifice, it'll quickly become a bad card. Vinny says the artist was drunk. Yeah, I bet. He was definitely on something. Ebon Stronghold. It is the black version of the Dwarven Stronghold. Elven Fortress. Elves are one of the creatures represented for green. Probably the most popular, most represented for green itself. Elves will appear in many, many more sets. You can pay a green and a colorless. Target blocking creature gets +1 toughness until end of turn. Many elven fortresses weren't built by masons and carpenters, but created from the living forest itself. It's like a treetop village. Reminds me of Donkey Kong Country. And they get more artwork. This one's artwork is pretty good. I feel like I can walk up these steps and see the glyphs and designs carved into these massive redwood tree trunks. The size of the obvious fortress walls often misled foes. Actually, the elves enchanted the forest itself to provide the first line of defense with tangling vines and stinging thorns. This one looks a lot less like a fortress and more like a palace, because it looks like one could easily go through this glade and up through these hills. Thalids are not ordinary enemies of flesh and bone and reason. They attack with no thought for our strength or their own losses. I fear our fortress shall be overwhelmed. By Kaliki of Havenwood. Thalids are a new creature type from Magic and the other representation of green. The elves will be warring for them for territory. Thalids are living fungus creatures, and they would be brought back and even made more powerful in years to come. This elven fortress got like a literal gate to it. With instead of using more wood, this one uses stones. Burn it down, you say? Now that's a stupid idea. What do you suppose will become of those overhanging branches? Whom? And then what do you suppose will become of us? From Ervajur's daughter. Probably one of the only cards I know that has stupid in the flavor text, not counting from the Unglued set or any of the other silver bordered joke sets, as I like to call them. Elven Leer for 2 mana. We use that cycle again. 2 mana, 1 mana, tap, sacrifice artifacts. Give a creature a +2/+2 until end of turn. Scholars are uncertain whether it was the actual sound or some other magical property of the Elven Leer that transformed its player. Not really that good because the opponent could always see it coming. Giving a creature any kind of buff until end of turn, I think, is only really good as an instant when your opponent cannot predict it. It's another term for that is called a combat trick. Usually the opponent would make a safe decision in blocking one of your creatures, hoping or knowing in their own mind that their creature will survive the exchange, but using an instant to boost your own creature takes them by surprise, and then their decision ends up not working out in their favor. Elvish Farmer, 2 mana, 0/2. During your upkeep, put a spore counter on him. You can remove 3 spore counters to put a Saproling token into play. Treat this token as a 1/1 green creature. You could also sacrifice a Saproling to gain 2 life. Saprolings are living little plant tokens, and they would also get a lot of cards made for those decks, and they can get out of control really quick. Elvish Farmer is really good in a Saproling deck because you don't even have to tap him. His ability costs nothing, so you can sacrifice as many Saprolings as you want to gain 2 life for each one you sacrifice. By himself, he's slow at putting them out because he only gets 1 spore counter during his upkeep. Again, as I said, the Thalids have this ability as well where they make Saprolings themselves. There would be cards later on that could speed up the process. And to this day, Thalid and Saproling decks should not be taken lightly. Elvish Hunter, 2 mana, 1/1, pay a green and a colorless and tap it. Target creature does not untap as normal during its controller's next untap step. Definitely a unique ability or a rare ability for green to have. The only other green cards I know that have those ability would be the Orochi, the snake people from the Kamigawa set, but that would be many years later. Elves often tip their arrows with a drug that caused a deep but harmless sleep. I remember I did own this card because I remember this side profile of you and these elk antlers. As the climate cooled, many elves turned to Thalid farming for food, while the hunters honed their skills on what little game remained. Yeah, this is talking about how the climate is cooling because of the ash-covered skies. Winter is coming. And he says, especially now, Myco Tyrant is great. Yeah, Myco Tyrant is great. I like this artwork. I know Susan Van Camp did a lot of where it would have a close-up profile of the creature depicted in the artwork. The elves never had a standing army. When battle came, they pressed hunters, scouts, and farmers into a surprisingly effective militia. Now we have an Elvish Scout, 1/1 for 1 green. Pay a green and tap them. Untap an attacking creature you control. That creature does not deal or receive combat damage this turn. So if your opponent played a combat trick, an instant, and your creature would die, the Elvish Scout can save them from that. It can't be used for blocking. It can only be used for attacking. That's the only time I would see him being able to be used effectively. But I personally would never run the card. Even one whose ears were closely tuned to the stones of Havenwood could miss hearing a scout move past. This guy is blending in with a tree limb, spying on this Minotaur. Even for elves, they were stealthy little twerps. They'd taken our measure before we had even seen them. From Marshal Volkanov. Hey, Lunda, how are you? This scout is pretty. Although the elves of Havenwood lived in isolated villages, their swift communications allowed them to act as a single community. Fairlight Priest. 3 mana, 1/3. I don't think I've ever seen that card. What's tomorrow, Lunda? Happy Easter. Pay 1 colorless to add 1 white to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. If more than 3 colorless is spent in this way during a turn, you must sacrifice the priest at the end of the turn. So this is mana fixing for white. I did not know this card existed, but I don't think I would ever run the card because there are so many ways to fix mana now safely. But back in the day, it might have seen some use. Although their methods were often brutal, Pharaoh's followers believed in the preservation of justice and virtue. I assume this is... Oh no, this is a orc or something. Some really cartoony, froggish looking creature bowing to be blessed by the Fairlight Priest. Linda, I will be spending Easter with some of my family tomorrow. Pharaoh's Mantle. I did own this card. I do remember it. If a enchanted creature attacks and is not blocked, you may have it deal X plus 2 damage to any other target creature where X is the power of that creature. If you do, it deals no damage to the opponent this turn. I use this enchantment in my Shadow deck. Shadow would be an ability that would mean the creature could not be blocked unless the blocking creature also had Shadow. But that ability won't come up for many, many years. But it was a way because shadow creatures cannot block non-shadow creatures. So if your deck had a lot of creatures with shadow, you were open to also combat as well. This was a way to kind of control the opponent's side of the board by sniping. As long as your creature was strong enough, each creature, each turn. You and your peeps are going to party? Let's go, Lunda. Pharaoh's Zealot. 3 mana, 2/2. This guy looks like Victor Zsasz from Batman. He is strapped with daggers. I've never seen this card. If Pharaoh's Zealot attacks and is not blocked, you may choose to have it deal 3 damage to a creature. Oh, I guess that's a reoccurring theme for the Pharaoh cards. After the fall of Trocare, Pharaoh and his followers formally broke their ties with the rest of Akisha. And here is another one. This guy looks like Doc Brown almost from Back to the Future. Pharaoh and his followers became a formidable band of vigilantes battling Akishans and followers of Turok. So it looks like there was some insurgents amongst the townsfolk. This guy looks like Quan Chi from Mortal Kombat or Uncle Fester. Pharaoh, a former priest, believed Akisha was far too complacent toward the Order of the Ebon Hand. So yeah, it looks like Pharaoh led a little uprising because he was not happy with the way, just as the card explained. Here's a Thallid, Feral Thallid. Large creature, 6 mana, 6/3. During your upkeep, put a spore counter on him. For free, you can remove 3 spore counters to regenerate him. Born and bred of fungus, Thallids were nearly impossible to kill. Excuse me. I remember playing Magic back in the day, and one of my friends had this card. And I hated it because I could never really kill it. Starting out, I did not have a lot of good cards in my deck. And the Feral Thallid, 6 mana for 6 power is decent. Its 3 toughness is lacking, though. Nowadays, it is outclassed as well. but it was a heavy beater for, and probably one of the largest Thalids that the game has. Excuse me. Up next, we got Fungal Bloom for 2 green. You could pay 2 green to put a spore counter on target fungus. So, has that been changed to Thalid? No. Thalids could absorb energy from the forest itself. Even elves were at a disadvantage in fighting them. So this card alone would speed up the process of putting out the Saproling tokens and the Feral Thalid's regenerative ability. So, as I mentioned, even in the set itself, there's ways to power out and make the Saprolings get out of control quicker. Goblin Surgeon? Chirurgeon? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'm just going to call it Surgeon, and that's just a different spelling of it. It's a 0/2 goblin. You can sacrifice a goblin to regenerate target creature for no mana at all. That's actually pretty good if you have a lot of goblin tokens to sacrifice. Here we have a more cartoony artwork. This is definitely the head of a Llanowar elf. He's putting on a tiger person's body. I asked one of my aides how they do it, but all he said was, "Trust me, Mayor, you don't want to know." Lydia Winworth, Mayor of Trocare. Did he have flavor text? Oh, yeah. The surgeons patched up their fallen comrades with a gruesome mix of twisted limbs and mangled flesh. Ooh, he's getting his leg sawed off. And these two are enjoying it. Perhaps goblins are good for something after all. Attributed to General Zerthog. Goblin Flotilla, 3 mana 2/2 Island Walk. At the beginning of combat, pay 1 red or any creatures blocking or blocked by Goblin Flotilla gain first strike until end of turn. Exceptionally poor sailors, goblins usually arrived at their destination retching and in no condition to fight. Yeah, they do not do good on water. They should stick to the mountains. Goblin Grenade. Oh, I forgot about Goblin Grenade. This is one of the most powerful goblin related spells in Magic today. For 1 red mana, you sacrifice one of your goblins to have it deal 5 damage to any target. According to the accepted theory, the grenade held some kind of flammable mixture and was carried to its target by a hapless goblin. Goblin decks, by nature, are already fast and aggressive. The fact that you can do 5 damage to any target just by killing one of your own goblins is always going to be worth the trade. Just 4 uses of Goblin Grenade is already 20 damage to your opponent's head directly if you have the goblins to sacrifice. You could win the game by just sacrificing 4 creatures and paying 4 mana. Definitely a very powerful card that I don't think will ever be reprinted again for like standard rotations. Definitely, I cannot stress this enough. Probably one of the most powerful goblin deck spells out there. I think it has multiple artwork too. Yep, this guy's about to... He's just holding it and this dwarf is like, oh no. I don't suppose we could teach them to throw the cursed things. That's funny though. No, I did have this artwork. He's got, instead of grenade, he's just got dynamite and a firework here. Without their massive numbers, the goblins could have never launched such a successful offensive. Goblin Kites. For 2 mana, enchantment. I've never seen this card. For 1 red, target creature you control, which has toughness 2 or less, gains flying until end of turn. Other effects may be used to increase the creature's toughness. At the end of your turn, flip a coin, and the opponent calls heads or tails while the coin is in the air. If the flip ends up in the opponent's favor, sacrifice the creature. Definitely did not know of this card's existence. I guess this guy is dumping severed heads, guts, and puke onto his opponent. It is funny, though, because we can see how crude this kite is. And the fact that the opponent flips a coin means, will your creature survive the landing? Pretty funny otherwise. Goblin War Drums, another powerful goblin-type spell. Not as powerful as Goblin Grenade, but can still be devastating in the right if you have a lot of numbers out there. Each attacking creature you control... Oh, wait. It's not just for goblins. It's for all your creatures. Never mind. It's just decent overall. Each attacking creature you control... Okay, I reread that in my head. I'm trying to think of an easier way to say that. Each creature you control must be blocked by at least 2 creatures. And they made the keyword menace. If you have a lot of creatures out, then you're going to have a lot of creatures going through. Because if the opponent requires 2 creatures just to block 1 creature, goblins especially, because they are one of the quickest red creatures in Magic. So you definitely want sheer numbers to get the most out of this card. I like this set. These are scarier looking goblins from Richard Kane Ferguson. Defending their outer trenches, we strained our eyes in the darkness. All we could hear were the drums' terrible pounding. Dobbs, on my right, broke first. Soon we were all heading for the walls. Corporal Peter Douglas, counter-martial testimony. Or court-martial testimony. Oh, he got in trouble for abandoning their post. This is a cartoony drum. The war drums enabled goblin and orcish armies to crush the sparsely defended dwarf cities. This artwork's not so good. But these are 2 giant skulls that they made the drums out of. When creating new war drums, goblin designers sought out the highest quality skulls. Sarah Angel skulls were most highly prized, although most acknowledged that the skull of the exotic sea serpent made for a richer tone. That's a cool flavor concept, and it matches the artwork. Goblin Warrens. You pay a red and 2, and then another red and 2. Sacrifice 2 goblins you control to put 3 goblin tokens into play. Treat these as 1/1 red creatures. Goblins spread underground, their number hidden from the enemy until it was too late. So you sacrifice 2 of your goblins to get 3 out. So if left unchecked, for each time you paid the 3 mana, your goblin numbers would increase by 1. You can see that this goblin mother has all these goblin kids, and she just has a baby right here. We're all getting out of control. Hand of Justice. 6 mana, 2/6. Tap him and tap 3 white creatures you control to destroy any creature. The Hand of Justice will come to cleanse the world if we are true. From Oliver Farrell. Definitely a powerful card to be able to outright destroy any creature. You do have to have 3 other creatures out on the battlefield that you use to do so. Havenwood Battleground. The green sacrifice ramp spell. I guess the elves hung these, what used to be people, I assume. Now they're skeletons. I like the artwork on this card. I've never seen it before. I need to go about getting them. Heroism. 3 mana For free, you can sacrifice a white creature to have attacking red creatures deal no damage, no combat damage this turn. The attacking player may pay a red and 2 colors for a creature to have it deal damage as normal. I didn't know this card existed. Linda says her favorite store, Dollar Tree, has already got some 4th of July stuff in stock. You're already imagining barbecue party, and it's only Easter. I am going to miss the Cadbury eggs that Easter has to offer. High Tide. For 1 blue until end of turn, all your islands produce an additional blue mana when tapped for mana. When the very tides turn against you, it's time to consider retirement. General Zerthog. A ramp version for blue. We don't often see that either. High Tide got another artwork. May Sylvan and her tides favor you. Traditional Merfolk blessing. Merfolk were the other side of the color blue representation in the set. And one of the most popular blue tribes of Magic. This set depicts just a coral reef. We got flying fish here, an octopus, a lionfish, flounder. By the time their enemies noticed the sea's changing mood, the Bodalians had often shifted formation and were ready to attack. The Bodalians were the species of merfolk on Sarpedia. Hollow Trees. This is a storage land for green. I also like the artwork too. Looking at these sets, I do like all the artwork of the non-basic lands from Fallen Empires. Homerid, here's our crab, or I should say lobster people. 3 mana, 2/2. Put a tide counter on Homerid when it enters the battlefield and during your upkeep. If there is 1 tide counter on Homerid, he gets -1/-1. If there are 3 tide counters on Homerid, he gets +1/+1. If there are 4 tide counters on Homerid, remove them all. So every turn, the Homerid even got bigger or smaller. I can see why Homerids didn't really excel and were popular in Magic's timeline, based on the fact that if you had multiple out, then it was kind of a pain to constantly add and remove counters. And the fact that his power toughness always changed. It would just, I think, mix up the game in general. Nowadays, you might be able to get away with it, especially if you play digitally, where the game does all the effects for you. But until then, I think the Homerids were a little ahead of their time. I do like the idea of lobster crustacean people, though. I do want to see more of them being represented. I know currently there is a Magic the Gathering set that's going to come out later in 2024 that has nothing but animal tribes. So here's hoping the Homerid come back. See, they have so much rules they don't even have flavor text. Here's some more close-up looking of them red. Probably my favorite from all of the art so far. And more of them. Homerid Shaman. For 4 mana 2/1, you just pay a blue to tap a green creature. Now this would ruin a green deck stay just by, for every blue mana that you have, you disable each creature they control. Or if they have a big creature to block, you can just pay a blue and tap that green creature down. With blue having also a lot of spells to change the text of a color, you could easily change the keyword green to whatever color your opponent is playing, making Homerid Shaman a powerful card indeed. The ground grew swampy. Hooves and claws sank into the marshy earth. Snarls of rage and bleats of despair echoed through the trees as waters grew higher and higher. From Kaliki of Havenwood, Havenwood remembered. I am going to go ahead and choose Homerid Shaman as my favorite card over Deepspawn because I actually did use Homerid Shaman, and I did use the strategy that I mentioned of changing the color text with Sleight of Mind or many of the other cards that we reviewed that can change the keyword color on a card. Homerid Spawning Bed for 2 blue. You pay 2 blue and a colors, sacrifice a blue creature to put X Camerid tokens into play, where X is the casting cost of the sacrificed creature. Treat these tokens as 1/1 blue creatures. So if you had Deep Spawn out and you just didn't really want to use Deep Spawn anymore, Deep Spawn cost 8, you pay 3, sacrifice the Deep Spawn, and you get 8 1/1 tokens to litter the battlefield with. Blue does not really, out of all 5 colors of Magic, I think blue has the least amount of cards to be able to swarm your opponent with just sheer numbers. The Homerid Spawning Bed is a step in that direction. Homerid Warrior, 5 mana, 3/3. You can pay a blue. Homerid Warrior may not be the target of spells or abilities until the end of the turn, and he does not untap as normal during your next untap step. If Homerid Warrior is untapped, tap it. So they kind of act like hermit crabs. And it's the same ability that the Deep Spawn had. Yeah, you saved your creature from a spell or ability, but at the cost of them being shut down on the next turn. And they get multiple artworks as well. This one just pretty much killed a giant eel or sea serpent. And this one has a huge cypress wood club of Flotsam or Jetsam. I like the artwork, though. Pretty cool. Pretty solid. Hymn to Turok, probably one of the best discard spells in the entire game. For only 2 black, target player discards 2 cards at random from their hand. If they don't have enough cards in hand, their entire hand is discarded. This eerie wailing hymn caused insanity even in hardened warriors. A lot of black cards did not have where the opponent had to randomly discard them. A lot of cards also discard spells usually cost 1 mana more, equivalent to how many cards had to be discarded. For example, Mind Rot. Mind Rot costs 3 mana, and the opponent discards 2 cards. Ravenous Rats, when they enter the battlefield and an opponent discards a card, they cost 2 mana. So 1 card discarded, 2 mana. 2 cards discarded, 3 mana. Hymn to Turok breaks that and speeds through with 2 cards discarded randomly. So your opponent could even discard some land that they really needed. They don't get a choice. The fact that it's random just makes this card so powerful. And if you have a discard deck, if you're not running Hymn to Turok, then you're not running your deck at its max capacity. Whereas Goblin Grenade is one of the best Goblin cards in the entire game, Hymn to Turok is the best discard card in my opinion. Here's another version where they are performing a ritual. Turok's power was such that his followers defied him after his death. And another one with this dark wizard. Knowing the hymn's power, the followers of Leetburg carefully guarded their pillaged transcriptions. And another one where it looks like a dark deal is being had amongst the Order of the Ebon Hand. Members of the Order often played the hymn on instruments made from their victims' bones. Spooky. Acacian Infantry for 1 white. Oh, I thought banding was gone. They gain banding until end of turn, or they gain first strike until end of turn. The Acacian army easily repelled earlier surprise attacks by the orcs on border towns like Montford. Just regular 1/1. The first strike ability, I guess, is decent. The fact that it can be colorless means he can easily fit in a triple or duo colored deck. And he gets more artwork. Although they had long been concerned about the Order of the Ebon Hand, the Acacians faced an even greater threat from goblin and orcish raiders. Valiant Acacia was the last of the Sarpadian empires to fall. Its faithful soldiers defended their cities to the very end. Never surrender. Motto carved into a fragment of an Akishan wall. Akishan Javelineers for 1 white, 1/1. When Akishan Javelineers enters the battlefield, put a javelin counter on it. Tap it to remove a javelin counter to have the Javelineers deal 1 damage to any target. So they can even hit the opponent with it. They throw their javelin and then that's it. Then they don't do anything after that. They can take out a creature with 1 toughness or be used to deal lethal damage to any creature that you need on the battlefield gone, as long as they have the 1 toughness left to do so. More artwork. This guy looks like he's from Rome. This guy's got a jester's mask or octopus on his head. I do remember that I did own this card as well, but I never really used them. Akishan Lieutenant, 2 mana, 1/2. You can pay a white and a colorless. Target soldier gets +1 power until end of turn. Really good. Soldiers are very aggressive in today's standards for Magic. And to become an officer, an Akishan soldier had to pass a series of tests. These evaluated not only fighting and leadership skills, but also integrity, honor, and moral strength. I have a memory of this card, and it's not my proudest moment, but I'll go ahead and tell you guys anyway. First of all, this lieutenant's haircut I can't get over. He's got a cereal bowl haircut. He reminds me of Moe from the Three Stooges. But anyway, on to the story. So I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. My sister never played Magic, but I think all of my brothers did at one point. And I believe one of my brothers was 6 or 7 at the time, maybe a little bit older. And I was like 15, 16. Maybe a little younger. But anyway, my brother beat me with this card, and I thought that because I had been playing Magic longer and that I was older than him, that I had the game won. But with Akishan Lieutenant and the rest of his soldiers, he ended up destroying me, and I just got so mad at this card that I grabbed my brother's Akishan Lieutenant card and I scraped it against our wall, and our walls were painted blue, so some of the paint from the wall had gotten on the card. And after I had done it, I had felt really bad because I never want to damage other people's property, no matter how expensive or how cheap that property is. And the fact that I took my anger out on my own brother, I am not proud at all of this moment. But full transparency, this is what the memory of this card did to me. I don't have many rage moments in Magic the Gathering anymore. I think that was my most severe ones. Like I said, I had learned my lesson, and I do feel bad about it. And my brother does indeed watch these streams. So, again, I apologize for what I did to you back then. And your Akishan Lieutenant. And your victory was well deserved. Next, we have Akishan Money Changer. This artwork is terrible. I'm sorry. But it's Drew Tucker. He has that primitive art style. 1 white, 0/2. Money Changer deals 3 damage to you when he enters the battlefield. Put 3 credit counters on him. During your upkeep, put a credit counter on Money Changer. You can sacrifice the Money Changer to gain 1 life for each credit counter on him. Use this ability only during your upkeep. So that's a big drawback, that you can only use it during your upkeep. If you could sacrifice it at any time, decent card. You pay 3 life when he enters the battlefield, but over time, you get those 3 credit counters, and then each turn you get an additional counter. So it's like you're taking a gamble. But if your opponent destroys them and it's on their turn they destroy him, then you can't sacrifice them. You can only sacrifice them during your upkeep. That's the drawback. That's the risk you take about donating money in the bank. This guy using balance and scales to form accounts. I did have this one. This card reminds me of Benjamin Franklin. Big Ben with his bag of money. He doesn't look happy, though. I guess money did not do well for the Acacians in the upcoming apocalypse for them. Acacian Phalanx, 5 mana, 2/4 banding. She's ready to go, and she's pissed, and she's like, "Oh, look, so what did you eat today that makes you feel like this?" Even after the wall was breached in half a dozen places, the phalanxes fought on, standing solidly against the onrushing raiders. Disciplined and dedicated, they held their ranks to the end, even in the face of tremendous losses. Never liked banding, never will. Acacian Priest. Here's Drew Tucker again with his primitive art. 1 white, you can pay triple or 2 white and 1. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Pretty good for white. May you be strong and valiant to defeat the enemies of the... May you be strong and valiant to defeat the enemies of the pure. Why is that sentence so hard? Leapbur's Prayer. Even though it costs 3 mana to give one creature +1/+1 until end of turn, the fact that it could be any creature, you could help boost. If you're playing a team game, you could target your opponent's or your teammate's creature with this to power it up. You only cost 1 white as well. Good card. Even in today's standards, it's a good card. Acacian Scout. 1/1 for 1. Pay 1 tap and target creature gains first strike until end of turn. He could also give it to himself. Because the orc hordes attacked along the entire border, scouts were essential to Acacia's defense. Although it would be better just to have a creature, 1/1 creature with first strike, and they do exist. She's looking through the wheat fields. Let it be known that Alis Kona acted with honor and bravery in the defense town of Montfort, risking her life to scout the enemy's position. Proclamation granting knighthood. Of course I'm not a spy. The enemy has spies. I'm a scout. Alis Kona. Well, this card is very misleading because you have this scout riding a giant bat. So you would think by looking at this card that this creature would have flying or give you something flying based on the bat artwork, but it doesn't. Scouting is the art of balancing the need to go undiscovered with the need to get all the information you can. It's only by Leapbur's good grace that I'm still alive today. Acacian Skirmishers. I don't think I've ever seen this card. 4 mana, 1/1, banding first strike. All creatures that band with Skirmishers when attacking gain first strike until end of turn. Skirmishers engage raiders before they could reach the towns. Although these units typically suffered huge losses, they never lacked volunteers. Acacian Store, the white storage land. I like the artwork as well. You can see there's a lot of dead trees because the trees are starting to lose all their green due to the lack of sunlight available. Acacian Town. It's not a land, but it is a sorcery. For 6 mana, put 4 1/1 tokens onto the battlefield. Treat these as, I think, humans now? Oh, they're just citizens. Acacia's once peaceful towns faced increasing attacks from orcs and goblins as the climate cooled. By the time the Empire fell, they were little more than armed camps. They definitely did not survive the upcoming cold weather. Implements of Sacrifice. 2 mana, 1 tap it. Sacrifice Implements of Sacrifice. Add 2 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. Relics of the Order of the Ebon Hand. The Bowl and Dagger bespeak the hideous cruelty of its rituals. Good if you need extra mana, but still at a slow rate. Initiates of the Ebon Hand for 1/1 black. I do remember this artwork. I thought it was sick having this guy that having a giant eye on his chest. I thought that was pretty cool. He looks like he might be in pain, but we are no longer nature's children, but her masters. Oath of the Ebon Hand. You can pay a colorist to add 1 black to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. If more than 3 is spent in this way, you must sacrifice him at the end of the turn. So he's like the initiate of the Leaper, the one white cleric. He does the black version. And we have the cartoony looking one here. This is like he's got a King K. Rool eye going on. Ebon leaders soon realized that non-human races often had special talents that could be exploited. This one has a female witch with 2 sacrificial daggers and a giant jack-o'-lantern behind her grinning. Many initiates sacrificed a hand in order to become full members of the order. Well, she still has her 2 hands. I'd be like, why does she get to keep her hands if I had to sacrifice mine? Mercian for 4 mana. Enchant creature. Put 3 net counters on Mercian when it enters the battlefield. Target creature does not untap as normal during its untap step before they're able to use them. I gotta check. Is my stream lagging? Nope. We're still going. Oh, looks like this merfolk got caught in a fisherman's net. Look at the look of horror on his face. Same here. Don't get caught in a fishing net. And this one looks the opposite. It looks like this merfolk is trapping somebody in the net. Mindstab Thrall. 3 mana 2/2. If he attacks and is not blocked, you may sacrifice it to have the defending player discard 3 cards. If you do, he deals no combat damage this turn. That's a lot of cards to discard for 3 mana. This guy's running with a bomb. It's kind of the opposite of what the card says. I would think that he would like destroy something or destroy or deal damage instead of discard. This artwork I saw, I was shocked because it looks so realistic, and the idea of a human head walking around on an extra pair of hands while it's holding a scalpel in its top hand. Very freaky card, but it pulls it off all the way. And it's artwork like this that I remember that brought me into the game and invested me. I did have this card in one of my first black decks. And like I said, I just can't get over how awesome this artwork looks. I would say it would be my favorite card of the set, but I still got to stick with the Homerid Shaman based on its power value. But Mindstab Thrall definitely has one of the best artworks for the card. Necrite, again, here's Ron Spencer, and this artwork is sick too. He is cutting his own tongue with a butcher knife for whatever reason. I mean, he's a thrall. They were kind of bred to bleed. If Necrite attacks and is not blocked, you may sacrifice it to destroy target creature controlled by defending player. If you do, he deals no combat damage this turn. So Necrites kill Jirana Rur, ending the counterinsurgency. So you sacrifice your own creature to take out the opponent's creature if he gets through combat. Here's another Thrall. This one looks more alien-like. I'm getting Deoxys vibes. Ever see a wall drop Dead of Fright kid? It ain't pretty. Corporal Dobbs. And this artwork looks just weird. Drew Tucker strikes again. Was it the sight, smell, or aura of the Necrite that killed so effectively? Night Soil. For 2 green enchantment, pay a colorless, remove 2 creatures in any graveyard from the game to put a Saproling token onto the battlefield. Treat this as a 1/1 green creature. Some said killing the Thalids only encouraged them. A powerful card even to this day. Not only does this counter graveyard strategies, but it will also ensure you get Saproling tokens onto the battlefield as long as there are creatures in the graveyards to remove. Oh, I didn't know Night Soil had alternate artwork. There's a rake here. I assume this is a Saproling that might have gotten stepped on because he's flat. The elves gathered huge piles of rot to grow fungus. Out of imitation or forethought, the Thalids did the same. Oh, even more artwork. This one, again, Drew Tucker just looks like he threw dirt on a canvas. There are often more Thalids after a battle than before. Orcish Captain. For 1 red, 1/1, you can pay a colorless. Choose a target orc. Flip a coin. The opponent calls heads or tails in the air. If the flip ends up in your favor, that orc gets +2 to its power. Otherwise, it gets -2 to its toughness. There's a chance to win every battle. I had him in my coin flip deck. And more artwork. Yeah, they're ugly. They desert in droves, and their personal habits are enough to make you sick. But I'll say this for orcs: they make great spies. Ervajur's daughter. This one looks more like a goblin than an orc. Orcish armies often employed the smaller, swifter, and less intelligent goblins as spies. Well, there you go. You idiot! Never let the spies mingle with the orcish regulars after completing a mission. Now we'll never get them to fight. He's like, oh no, I've been found. Orcish veteran. 3 mana 2/2 cannot be assigned to block any white creature with power 1 or with power greater than 1. But you can pay red to give him first strike on the turn. Orcs are not exactly known for their valor. Although most orcs have seen countless battles, only a handful have actually fought in them. They're more bark than bite. Oh, this one's an old orc. Orcs often greeted promotions to a Kishan battle with anguished wails and pleas for mercy. He's definitely feeble. I think I work with a few old orcs. No, this guy looks hungry. I do like the purple sky, though. Unsuccessful in their early battle for Montfort, the orcs quickly tempered their bloodlust with cowardice. This orc looks badass. I do like this artwork. Although models of courage for orcs, the veterans quickly learned to fear the swift justice of their Akishan enemies. They did not survive the upcoming Ice Age either. Order of Leapbur, 2 white, protection from black. You can pay double white to give him +1 attack into end of turn, a single white to give him first strike into end of turn. Followers of Turok regarded all other religions equally with open contempt. Not so the followers of Leapbur, who made it their mission to eradicate the Order of the Ebon Hand. Great card. Protection from black's always good for white creatures, and the fact that these would be nicknamed as Pump Knights because you could pump all your white mana into them to fuel their power up. And giving them first strike also ensured most of the time that they would live in middle of combat because you could pump up their power to what you need, and as long as they're able to kill the opposing creature with first strike, that's all you had to worry about. Order of Leapbur got other artwork. The powers of the corrupt will fade before the fury of the pure. Bethan Leapbur, the way. And he's riding a unicorn. And these are jousting. Oh, this guy got it. The javelin right through him. Trained to battle the followers of Turok, the Order of Leapbur was not as successful in later conflicts with Orcish and Goblin raiders. Order of the Ebon Hand. Now, he is a straight-up centaur, and he's got a hook for a hand. This is probably the best-looking centaur I've ever seen, but he is not a centaur. He's just a cleric. He is the polar opposite of Order of Leapbur. He has protection from white. He does the same thing, pumps for power, and gives him first strike at end of turn, but for black. A true follower of Turok took pride in achievement to the exclusion of other concerns. This Order of Ebon Hand is more accurate as far as its the artwork to creature type. It's a huge claymore, though. There are intriguing similarities between the Order and Akisha's Leaper religion, suggesting the two had a common origin. Excuse me. This is my favorite artwork for Order of the Ebon Hand. I like the buzzsaw looking shield and the huge butcher axe and the trap jaw helm. Just the whole armor. I assume this used to be a armored thrall as well, based on how it's grafted onto this knight. Dedicated to the principles of Turok, members of the Order of the Ebon Hand demonstrated their devotion with grisly rituals. I'm going to say that this version of the card is my favorite card from Fallen Empires now, even better than Homerid Shaman and Mindstab Thrall, because I actually owned this version and I used it a lot. Excuse me. Org. He's like a giant orc with 4 arms. 5 mana, 6/6 trample. That's already good. 5 mana, 6/6 trample is good. However, he's got a drawback. Org may not attack if an opponent controls an untapped creature with power greater than 2. Org cannot be assigned to block any creature with power greater than 2. It's bigger than it thinks. So it's like a bully, what I nickname a bully creature. If the opponent doesn't have any other strong creatures out, then Org is a powerhouse. But once the opponent has a creature with power greater than 2, then Org becomes a coward and definitely loses its luster. Excuse me. If you're able to keep the battlefield free of strong creatures, though, then Org is a good win condition. Raiding Party. Look at the cake on this dude. 3 mana enchantment. Raiding Party may not be the target of white spells or abilities. You can pay a 0, sacrifice an orc to destroy all planes. A player may tap a white creature to prevent up to 2 planes from being destroyed in this way. I never knew this card existed. I guess this guy got blasted by lightning shooting out his back. I'm not sure what's going on here. Again, I never knew the card existed. Rainbow Veil. I never knew this land existed. Tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Control of Rainbow Veil passes to opponent at the end of the turn. In the feudal days of Acacia, finding the Rainbow Veil was often the goal of the knight's quests. Now, I did not know there was a land that taps for 1 mana of any color, but then it goes to your opponent. And then if they use it, it goes back to you. The fact that, and it also comes to play untapped, and you can add 1 mana of any color. The drawback of giving it to your opponent, though, it will boost them ahead for land. But if you don't have any other ways of getting mana of any color, there are plenty of options for that nowadays. But back in the day, I could see Rainbow Veil being heavily used. Ring of Renewal. For 5 mana, pay 5 and tap it. Discard a card at random from your hand to draw 2 cards. It's pretty expensive. To the uninitiated, the Ring of Renewal is merely an oddity. For those fluent in the wielding of magic, however, it is a source of great knowledge. River Merfolk. For 2 blue, he can gain Mountain Walk until end of turn. Dwelling in icy mountain streams near their goblin and orcish foes, the River Merfolk were known for their stoicism. Runes of Trocare is the pump sacrifice land for white. Sand Silos is the storage for blue. I assume the Homerid live here. Sea Singer. This is another powerful card from the Fallen Empires. For 2 blue and a colorless, if you don't control any islands, you must sacrifice Sea Singer. You can tap her to gain control of a creature of it. Gain control of target creature if its controller has at least 1 island. You lose control of that creature if Sea Singer leaves play, or if Sea Singer becomes untapped. You may choose not to untap her during your untap step. So she's only good if the opponent is playing blue or if you have cards that change their lands into islands. Soul Exchange. For 2 black, sacrifice a creature, but remove it from the game instead of putting it into your graveyard. Take a creature from your graveyard and put it directly onto the battlefield as though it were just summoned. Put a +2/+2 counter on that creature if the sacrifice creature was a thrall. I didn't know this card existed. Cool for flavor. Whoever just came back from the dead at the cost of a thrall's life. It adds to the lore of the thralls and keeps up with the sacrificial theme. Spirit Shield. For 3 mana, pay 2, tap it. Target creature gets +2 toughness as long as Spirit Shield remains tapped. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step. At times, survival must outweigh all other considerations. Spore Cloud. That guy clutching his throat is me coughing right now. Tap all blocking creatures. No creatures deal combat damage this turn. Neither attacking or blocking creatures untap as normal during their controller's next untap step. A slower version of Fog, but the fact that it keeps all creatures tapped buys you a whole extra turn to survive. Here's another version of Spore Cloud I've never seen. And another version, and this reminds me of COVID. Spore Flower for 2 blue. Is this a fungus or a flower? Oh, it's still a fungus. It's a 0/1. During your upkeep, put a spore counter on it. You can remove 3 spore counters to also make sure creatures do no combat damage this turn, giving green the ability to use Fog. I can't pronounce this. Sphyelunite Priest. For 2 mana, 1/1, pay 2 blue and tap it. Target creature may not be the target of spells or abilities until the end of the turn. You can only use this ability during their upkeep. The fact that you can only use this ability during your upkeep really just says this card sucks. Early Verdalians worshipped Sivillun, goddess of the Pearl Moon. Later, she became a more abstract figure. Sphyelunite Temple, the pump sacrifice land for blue. Beautiful artwork. It's amazing. The Fallen Empire lands blow me away for this set. Thallid for 1/1 for 1 green. During your upkeep, put a spore counter on it. At any time, you can remove 3 spore counters to create a 1/1 sapling. This looks like Cousin It with an eyeball here. Pretty good card. Well, back in the day, it was good because you could just leave it on the battlefield and eventually keep getting 1/1 tokens. But by itself, not so good for nowadays standards. There are a lot of better Thallids out there now. But these were the original. Here's Ron Spencer's version. It's cool because he's drawing from the land and growing more Thallids out of these dying trees. And this Thallid is walking with a staff. It's cool that the Thallids can be so dramatically different because there are so many different kinds of fungi in the world. Thallid Devourer. 3 mana, 2/2. During your upkeep, put a spore counter on it. He has the Thallid ability where he makes the saplings every 3 turns. You could also sacrifice a sapling to give Thallid Devourer +1/+2 until end of turn. I do wish that it was just a straight up +2/+2 instead of the +1/+2. But small beast that could get out of hand nonetheless, depending on how many Thallids were on the battlefield. Thelonite Druid for 3 mana, 1/1. Pay a green and a colorless and tap it. Sacrifice a creature to turn all your forests into 2/3 creatures until end of turn. Forests still count as lands, but may not be tapped for mana the turn they enter the battlefield. So if you have 20 forests out and you use this card, then you're going to be able to attack with at least 18 of your forests, and then you have 2 power apiece. It could be a game-winning bot. But the opponent can see it coming because you need a full turn for the druid to survive. Thelanite Monk. This is a dancing praying mantis. Is it an insect? Yes, it is. They updated the card. 4 mana, 1/2. Tap it to sacrifice a green creature to turn a target land into a basic forest. Put a counter on that land to mark the change. That's cool. That would give your creatures, making your forest walk creatures unblockable. As the climate worsened, some Thelanites turned to fertilizing with flesh blood in an attempt to keep Havenwood alive and growing. Oh, the druids end up becoming more and more hermetic and dangerous. Thelan's Chant. 3 mana. During your upkeep, pay 1 green or sacrifice the chant. Whenever a player puts a swamp onto the battlefield, Thelan's Chant deals 3 damage to them unless they put a -1/-1 counter on a creature they control. I didn't know this card existed. Thelan's Curse. Oh, this guy is getting crucified with tree branches. 2 green. Blue creatures do not untap as normal during their untap steps. During their creature's controller's upkeep, they may pay an additional blue to untap them. Each creature may be untapped in this way only once per turn. Color hosing green versus blue. This is probably my favorite Thallid, the Thorn Thallid. 3 mana. He has the Spore counter ability during his turn, or at the beginning of your turn, you get 1 Spore counter. You remove 3 Spore counters at any time to deal 1 damage to any target. Direct damage for green was a rarity, and the danger in cultivating massive plants caught the elves by surprise. And I can just imagine the Thorn Thallid firing thorns out of each side of its mouth. Here's a more goofy looking version of Thorn Thallid. I don't know if he's blowing air and if these thorns are going to come out his back or if he actually spits out the thorns. Regardless, the cooling climate forced the elves to experiment with new food sources. Hey, I like mushrooms on my pizza. I like mushrooms with anything. This looks like the Moss Monster from the Legends set, like a baby version. 3 mana, 2/2. Oh wait, it's the same. It's Thorn Thallid, just different artwork. I don't know which is worse, getting hit with those darts or having to watch them grow back. An Orcish Soldier. This is a more octopi-looking Thallid. I don't see where the thorns are going to be fired from, unless these little tubes on the end of their tentacles. Or maybe there's some small thorns on there. Scholars still debate whether the Thallids were truly sentient. And here's the Thrall Champion. 5 mana, 2/2. All Thralls get +1/+1. You can tap him to gain control of target Thrall. If you lose control of target Thrall if Thrall Champion leaves play, or you lose control of Thrall Champion. Those idiots should have never bred Thralls for combat. So these are the Thralls that helped the Thrall Rebellion, where they earned their short-lived freedom because they did not survive well on their own afterwards. Thrall Retainer for 1 green. Enchanter creature gets +1/+1. You can sacrifice Thrall Retainer to regenerate the creature it enchants. Until the Rebellion, Thralls served their masters faithfully, even at the cost of their own lives. The artwork, I guess the Thrall's using this Morning Star and might be worried that it's going to come back and hit him in the face. Thrall Wizard. 3 mana. You can pay a black and a colorless. Counters a black spell unless the controller pays an additional 3 colorless or 1 black. In crafting intelligent thralls to assist in sacrifices, Sar inadvertently set the stage for the Thrall Rebellion. So these were the brains behind the rebellion. You can see, like, this guy's got on his neck bones, he's got a whole nother lower jaw, like the bottom jaw of a dragon. Sick artwork, nonetheless. Tidal Flats. For 1 blue, pay 2 blue. All your creatures that are blocking any non-flying creatures gain first strike until end of turn. The attacking player may pay 1 colorless for each attacking creature to prevent Tidal Flats from giving the creature's blocker first strike. I think I own the card, but I'm not sure. I've never used it. Tidal Flats gets additional artwork. And yet again, this is a lot more barren. I assume the water's over here, but this is a wasteland. Tidal Influence. It's a brain-looking jellyfish. 3 mana, put a tide counter on Tidal Influence when it enters the battlefield and during your upkeep. If there is 1 counter on Tide Influence, all blue creatures get power -2. If there are 3 tide counters on Tidal Influence, all blue creatures get power +2. When there are 4 counters on Tidal Influence, remove them all. You cannot cast Tidal Influence if there is another Tidal Influence in play. So it kind of gives a modified version of the Homerid ability to blue creatures. I did not know there was an enchantment that did such. Torok's Chant. Another enchantment. During your upkeep, you must pay a black, or you sacrifice it whenever a player puts a forest onto the battlefield. Torok's Chant deals 3 damage to them unless they put a -1/-1 counter on target creature he or she controls. It's the polar opposite to the Havenwood Chant or whatever that card was that hosed black from green. Torok's Gate. This is a giant scarab. So the gate is the mouth of the scarab, which looks pretty cool. 3 mana, can only be played on a land you control. Sacrifice a Thrall to put 3 time counters on Torok's Gate. During your upkeep, remove a time counter from Torok's Gate. If there are no more time counters on it, sacrifice it. You can tap the land that Torok's Gate enchants. All attack creatures you control get +2 power and -1 toughness until end of turn. That's really good. I did not know that it existed. If you have a deck that has a lot of creatures like rats or zombies, then Torok's Gate, as long as the creatures don't have 1 toughness, you get a lot from it. But you can only pretty much use it. How many counters on it? There are no time counters. Can you sacrifice the Thrall to keep counters on it? Oh, yes, you can. So you can keep it out as long as you have Thralls to sacrifice. Vodalian Knights. 3 mana, 2/2, first strike. That's good for blue already. Pay a blue, they gain flying until end of turn. However, they cannot attack an opponent unless they control an island. That's their major drawback. If you have no islands, you must sacrifice Vodalian Knights. Fear the Knight leaping from the water into the air, weapon ready. Vodalian Mage, 3 mana, you pay a blue and tap it. Counter target spell unless its caster pays 1. Vodalian Mages are remarkable. Their merchants bring them arcane lore and devices from across the seas. Lydia Winforth, Mayor of Trocaire. Here's another artwork from it. Come back, cowards. Everyone knows Merfolk can't wield magic. Peshadar Durf, Goblin Flotilla Commander, last words. Well, the Merfolk must have sunk his boat. I think we're going on the last page. Yep. This is my favorite artwork for a Vodalian Mage. Vodalian Mages were invaluable in magical combat. Unfortunately, the Homerids rated with strength numbers and very little magic. Quentin Hoover strikes again with green and with one of the best looking up-close Merfolk cards that I've seen. Vodalian Soldiers, 2 mana, 1/2, no ability, terrible card. Vodalian Soldiers had some unique advantages. Often they would ride into battle on war machines rumored to have come from the far northern oceans. I don't see any war machines in the artwork, and their power toughness doesn't really do anything about war machines. They are very colorful. They are reflecting the coral reef that they live over. These Vodalian Soldiers are more primitive looking. You think you know everything there is to know about battle? You know orc droppings? Underwater combat is 3-dimensional. Those thrice-damn Vodalians don't attack in ranks, they attack in schools. And these guys are coming out of a tidal wave or tide of sorts. Stalwart soldiers, you stand against the Homerids for Vodalia and for honor. Your homeland cries out for protection, and the moment has come. Now let your valor shine and sound the cry to battle. Victory to Vodalia from Marshall Volnikov. Vodalian soldiers. Oh man, they got so much artwork. And there's a shark behind this one. Cooling climate introduced a new threat to Vodalia, the Homerids. Once a minor nuisance, they thrived in the changing environment. Their ceaseless attacks strained Vodalia's defenses to their limit, eventually overwhelming their empire. So the Homerids did defeat the Vodalians. Vodalian War Machine. Okay, these are the war machines we were talking about. And it looks like another carnival. 3 mana, 0/4 wall. For free, you can tap a merfolk you control to allow the war machine to attack this turn. Give them more war machine +2 power and +1 toughness until end of turn. If the war machine is put into the graveyard, all merfolk tapped in this way are destroyed. Oh, so you can tap multiple merfolk. The Zaylon Sword. 3 mana, pay 3 and tap it. Target creature gets +2 power as long as the sword stays tapped. You may choose not to untap it during your untap step. So it's kind of like this opposite version of the shield. No sheath shall hold what finds its home in flesh. And that will consist of the Fallen Empire set. Order of the Ebon Hand, the artwork with the spiky shield, still gets my favorite card of the set. Did I go back too far? I want to say I did. So if you guys also played Fallen Empires, I already got a few opinions from the live chat on what they thought of it. Vinny had said that it's Magic's toilet paper, but it had a few good cards out of it. I swear we'll get there. We'll get there. I gotta keep scrolling through this. I could have just resized it and would have been there. Gotta get through the Order Leaper, then we'll be on Order of the Ebon Hand, the closing card. Farewell. With these Fallen Empires, like I said, the Vodalians fell to the Homerids. The Dwarves fell, surprisingly, to the Orcs and the Goblins. The Elves were pretty much trying to survive against the elements and the Thalids that they had tried to use for food. And then the Iketians had to deal with inner strife with their own from... started with the F. Feral, as well as the sacrificial cult for the Order of the Ebon Hand, but then the Ebon Hand was overthrown by the thralls that they had sacrificed as well. And any empire remaining after that would soon fall to the upcoming Ice Age. But before we get to Ice Age, I think Homelands is the next set we will be talking about. So again, if you have any memories or strategies or opinions on any of the cards we revealed today, please feel free to let me know in the comment section, and I will see you all again next week. Tomorrow, for those of you who celebrate Easter, I hope you have a happy Easter. And until then, keep the magic going, and we'll gather around next week. Have a good one.